We've got the Pythagorean theorem today. I forgot to do an essential question, but we're just going to get straight to it. So Pythagorean theorem, kind of tough to say sometimes. It all has to do with right triangles, okay? So this is just a focus on right triangles only. And so as a just a reminder, a right triangle is going to have one angle measurement, right, that has 90 degrees, and that's what this little symbol means, 90 degrees. Okay, so in a right triangle, you have two legs. Okay, the legs always come from the actual right angle. So I've got a leg here and I got a leg here. And then the longest side is called the hypotenuse. Okay, so two legs and a hypotenuse make up a right triangle. All right, so now you've drawn that into your notes. We're going to talk about the key concept. So there's this idea that says, look, when I have a right triangle, if I call one of the legs A, the other leg B, and the hypotenuse C, then it works that if I take the one leg A and I square it, and I take the other leg B and I square it, and I add those two numbers together, that's going to be equal to the third leg squared. If we have time tomorrow or Friday, we will spend some time with an inquiry lab to prove this theorem. If we get the time, we'll go ahead and do that. But for now, go ahead and add that to your notes as a key concept. So now let's go ahead and apply this. Now, as you notice before we move on, it looks like we're going to be using exponents. All right, so we're going to want to try to remember your perfect squares and your exponents, and then get used to using some of our calculator skills as well. All right, so let's take a look at this example. I've got a triangle. It's a right triangle. It's facing the other way. It doesn't matter. And I've got two legs, a leg of 12 inches, a leg of 9 inches. And then I have my hypotenuse. That's what I don't know, okay? And so I can set this up. I say, look, if I know the two legs, I can go 9 squared, add it to 12 squared, and I'm going to make that equal to c squared. So I add those two things up by first going 9 squared, which is 81. 12 squared is 144. Add those numbers together, I get 225. Now, in order to get rid of my squared portion, I do the opposite, which is to square root. So if I square root both sides, I square root 225 and I square c squared, I turn it into my answer, which is 15. 15 is equal to c. So just a proof that 9 squared plus 12 squared equals 15 squared. Let's do another example. So in the game of baseball, there's a thing called the baseball diamond, right? You have home plate where the catcher stands. You have first base, second base, third base, and then back to home, right? So this is a diamond, is what they call it. The pitcher's mound is right here in the middle, about 60 feet away. And on a real baseball diamond, it's 90 feet from base to base. Okay, so when they run around, they go 90 feet, another 90, 90, and 90. What I want to know is how far is it from home plate to second base? So if a catcher is trying to throw someone out, has to draw a straight line right over the pitcher's mound to second base, how far is it from there to there? Well, in order to do that, what I can do is I can create a right triangle. I pulled out this right triangle that ends up being right here, right? This is a right triangle. Okay, if I pull that right triangle right out, I draw it over here, right? I can rotate it and you can see that it's a right triangle. All right, and so in this right triangle, the two legs are 90 and 90. I just don't know what this third leg is, which is the c, the hypotenuse. And so I'm going to set this up. 90 squared plus 90 squared equals c squared. I first do exponents first, right? Order of operations. It's 8100 and 8100. Add that stuff up together. I get 16,200. My last step would be to square root both sides. And so you're going to start using that on your calculator. I wouldn't imagine that you'd know that off the top of your head. So the square root symbol is this one right here, this little radical, all right? And so if I square root both, I end up with this answer, 127.3 feet. So that tells me what my hypotenuse is. If a catcher is throwing the ball from home plate to second base, it's 127.3 feet from there to there. Pretty neat. All right, we go on to my last example. Last type of questions that you're going to see, and we'll be practicing this more on Friday, is to when they ask you, hey, determine if each triangle side of a given length is a right triangle. So how do I know if it's a right triangle? And the only way I know it's a right triangle, it could be any kind of triangle, but if it's a right triangle, it's going to work. It's going to plug into the Pythagorean theorem. So let's try this first one out. 28, 195, and 197. Which one is the hypotenuse? Which is the longest number? The longest side in this particular instance is 197. So I know that has to be C. Okay, and these two, I don't care which one's A or which one's B, so I'll just say A and B. And so what I want to do now is I got to figure out, does this work out? 28 squared plus 195 squared plus 197 squared, 28 squared plus 195 squared, does that equal 197 squared? Well, I don't know. Let's figure it out. So I use my calculator, and 28 times 28, 784. 195 times itself is 38,025. If I add those two things together, does it equal 197 times 197, which is this number? And I use my calculator and I find out that yes, it does work out. So therefore, if it works out, check mark, I know that these are the measurements of a perfect right triangle. Let's take a look at one last part example, same kind of question. Hey, are these the sides of a right triangle? Well, again, which is the hypotenuse? It's got to be this one, right? It's the longest side. So I can call this one A, call this one B, call this one C, and I plug it in. A squared plus B squared, does it equal C squared? Well, let's find out. 900 plus 14,884, does that equal 15,625? And the answer to that would be no, it does not. So because they don't equal each other, I know that the sides of this triangle is not a perfect right triangle. Hey, the key word for this week's quiz, or maybe next week's, is spring break. Spring break. All right, that's it for notes today. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you tomorrow.